Hello, this is Ms. DB, and today we are going to talk about problems from Chapter 2, Section 5, which is on solving for a variable. So we will solve a formula for a given variable and also solve an equation in two or more variables for one of those variables. It's really very similar, but they're a little bit different. So a formula is an equation that states a rule for a relationship among quantities. For example, in d equals rt, this is distance equals rate times time. Right now d is isolated, so it's d equals. We're solving, we have d by itself. But we could rearrange this if we wanted r equals, so we could find the rate, or t equals, so we could find time. So we're going to solve for a variable by rearranging in a mathematical way. So we can't just flip them around and it wouldn't be true anymore. So we have to undo the operations just like if we were solving an equation. It's important to remember that when you do this worksheet and whenever you solve for a variable, you will almost always still have variables in the result, in your answer. You're not going to get d equals 12 for an answer. You're going to get d equals RT or t equals d divided by r, or something like that. There will still be a formula when you're done, or an equation that has more than one variable in it. So here's how these are the steps we'll go through. First, we're going to find the variable that we're asked to solve for. I usually highlight that or darken it, make it bold, so that I remember what I'm looking for. Sometimes there's lots of variables in the formula or in the equation. Next, we figure out the operations that are on that variable and the order in which they're applied. And then we use inverse operations to undo that and isolate the variable, just like if we're solving an equation for x or n or something. So here's an example. We have c equals pi times d. That's the circumference of a circle in terms of diameter d. So it's a formula to find circumference. And the next thing, they tell us what the circumference is, and what they are asking us to find the diameter. So if we had this d equals, it would be easier to solve. So we're going to solve this formula for d. So the first step is to write it down and then locate the d. Where is d in this formula? And then I always like to, once I find it, I like to color it a different color or highlight it or make it darker in some way. So there's the d, and it has pi multiplied to it. So we have to find out what is happening to the d right now, what operations are being done. It's being multiplied by pi. So now we have to undo that by dividing both sides by pi. So we divide both sides by pi. So our new formula is d equals circumference divided by pi. Now I flipped it around a little bit. It was circumference divided by pi equals d, but that's the same exact thing as the one that we have the box around. So we have solved this formula for d, for the diameter. And now the second part is to go ahead and answer the question about the circumference of a bowl is 18 inches. What is its diameter? Now we can take that c is equal to 18 and plug that in right here. Substitute in 18 where we see c, and d will be equal to 18 divided by pi. Now if they ask us to, we could get our calculators out and take 18 divided by pi, and it would be 5 point something, I think. But they just said leave pi in your answer, so then that would be your answer. So this would be part 1 answer, and this would be part 2's answer. First, you write the formula, solve for d, and then the second part is find out what the answer to this question is. All right, this is just another example like this. This is a very common formula, d equals RT, and they ask us to solve for t. So part 1 is to write that formula down, d equals RT, and find t. They turn t blue here. Now we need to think, what is being done to our variable t? It's being multiplied by r. What is the opposite of multiplying by r? It's dividing by r. And remember that you need to divide both sides by r to undo that. Now when you divide d divided by r, you just get d divided by r. You can't simplify that. You can't get a number or anything. But when you, on the other side, when you have r times t divided by r, these r's cancel, and we're left with this. So this is our answer for part 1 of this problem, that t is equal to d divided by r. Let me erase some of this so it doesn't look so messy. So now we have what t is equal to. Now our next step is to go ahead and see what the question was asking again. And they wanted us to find the time in hours that it would take Ernst van Dijk to travel 26.2 miles if his average speed was 18 miles per hour. So we need to take, this is our distance, so let's see, distance equals 26.2, and I know that because it says miles, and then his speed, that's rate, was 18 miles per hour. So we put the, we're going to use this formula, t will be equal to, that's what we're looking for, 26.2 divided by 18, and then our answer will be in hours. Now, I would need to get my calculator out before I'd be able to answer that question. And it's about 1.45, that's rounded, but that's okay, we'll leave it at 1.45. And that is time, that would be hours, because this is miles per hour. Sometimes your formulas are straight from geometry, like this one here. We have area equals 1/2 base times height. That's the area of a triangle. And b is the length of the base of the triangle, and h is the height. Solve for h. So that's, you don't necessarily need this need to know the picture, but the height of a triangle is at right angles to the base. So there's the height. Here's the base. So the area is equal to 1/2 base times height. So first write down your formula, A equals 1/2 BH, and then find H and highlight it or color it a different color. And let's think about what's happening to our H. It's being multiplied by B, and it's being multiplied by 1/2. We need to undo both of those things. So sometimes more than one thing is being done to a variable. We could divide both sides by 1/2 to undo that, or it's even easier to multiply both sides by 2. See how messy that looks? It's much easier to multiply both sides by 2 instead of that. So we multiply by 2 on both sides of the equation, and they wrote that as 2/1. That's fine. So it's all canceled out. The 2/1 cancels with the 1/2 on the right side, and on the left side we're just left with 2a. So now we have 2a is equal to b times h. So 2a equals b times h. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and divide both sides by the b as well, because we're trying to solve for h, remember. So we divide both sides by b, and of course on this side that will cancel, and we'll be left with 2a over b equals h. So this is the answer for this question. This one is not a word problem asking, okay, now find, what h is if the area is this and the base is this. But now we have another form of the original formula that would be handy to use if you were given the area and the base and asked to find the height. Here's another one. This one looks really tricky. We have, this is the formula for a person's typing speed. It's words per minute minus 10 times the error, all divided by m, which is the number of minutes typing. Because every error you make takes a little bit longer to fix it. So you have to subtract 10e for all your errors. So if you only have one error, you only have to subtract 1 times 10. But if you have multiple, it's going to subtract a lot. So we are going to solve for e. We want to know how many errors did this person have if this is the other information. So here's e over here. What's being done to the e? So much stuff. we have 10 being multiplied to it, right? We have a w here that's being added, and then it's all being divided by m. The last thing, the divided by m, that's the first thing we have to undo. If you ever have a whole thing being divided by a number or a variable, that's usually going to be your first thing in order of solving for this. So we are going to multiply both sides by m. When you multiply both sides by m, it doesn't change any of the numbers, but now we have ms over here. M times s is ms. On the other side, the multiplying by m cancels with the dividing by m, and you're just left with what's inside the parentheses, the w minus 10e. You do not distribute the m through here. You don't multiply m times w and m times 10e, because it cancels because you had one in the numerator and one in the denominator. So now we're getting closer to solving for e. The next thing to undo would be this w. We have a w being added, so we need to subtract it from both sides. So we subtract w from both sides. When you subtract it from ms, those are not like terms. We can't actually subtract it. We just write it after the ms. So now we have ms minus w equals negative 10e. Finally, then, you can undo the e is being multiplied by negative 10. So the opposite of that is to divide both sides by negative 10. And when you divide both sides by negative 10, this whole thing will get underlined. So our final answer then is ms minus w all divided by negative 10 is equal to e. Now, if you're typing, you would put the ms minus w in parentheses to show that all of that is being divided by negative 10. And then this has to be equal to e. If you did not put the equal e part, it would be wrong, because this is a formula that you are rearranging, and it has to have equal to what variable you solved for. So otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. We wouldn't know what it was all about. So don't forget the equal whatever the variable you're solving for is. A literal equation is just very similar to what we just did, except instead of this being a formula to find a specific thing, it's just an equation. Like maybe it's a line, or maybe it's just practice. But literal equations look very much like formulas. It's just that we don't know what they are. They're just variables and operations and numbers. So the first one's quite simple. They want you to solve x plus y equals 15 for x. All you have to do is subtract y from both sides. When you do that, remember that those are not like terms, so you just write the minus y at the end or at the beginning if you prefer. So you could either write x equals negative y plus 15, or it would be absolutely correct to write 15 minus y. Either one of those is correct. The next one, we want to solve pq equals x for q. Here's the q. It's being multiplied by p, so we need to divide both sides by p in order to undo the multiplication. We can't actually divide x divided by p, so we just write it out. We have q equals x over p. And again, if you're typing, use the division sign, which is the backslash, to show that you're dividing x divided by p. This is just another example. In this one, we have t, we're solving for t, and it's being multiplied by 2. So we need to divide by 2. When you divide by 2, you have to divide everything by 2, not just some of it. So when we divide by 2, you can put a line under the whole thing, and then we get that 5 minus b all divided by 2 is equal to t. The other way to do this problem that you'll see done sometimes is when you divide by 2, you divide every term by 2. So we would have 5/2 minus b over 2 equals t. This is also correct. Either of these would be a correct way of writing this formula, this equation. Solve for t. All right, so next we will do some of the problems that are on your worksheet so that you can practice and have some examples of how to do the problems on your worksheet.